Hey, it is Q&A time, kids. I thought we might end the podcast year with kind of a fun free-for-all, and once again, the listeners to the John Huff podcast did not let me down. So we are going to go to some weird places and some profound places. We are going to talk about Dharma. We are going to talk about tour memories. We are going to talk about Christmas music. We're going to talk about AC freaking DC. How you going to beat that for a holiday Festivus bonanza? I think it's going to be a good one, kids. Hope you enjoy it. And we'll get to it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff podcast. Oh, yay. I like doing the Q&A because Q&A does a couple of important things. Number one, it just gives us a chance to go to weird places. And I like going to weird places. You may have figured out by now that I like the arcane stuff. I like the randomness of a podcast, you know what I mean? And Q&A, I'm not directing this. I'm simply responding to what the listeners throw at me. And I just find that really fun to do. I find it interesting. And I enjoy doing it once in a while. Can't do it all the time. But I enjoy doing it once in a while. And now seems like the appropriate time because this is likely to be the last episode of the year. Planning to take next week off and do quite literally nothing. But in the nothing will be a lot of thinking about where we go from here with the podcast, what I might want to change, what I might want to evolve, what I might want to do differently, enhance, trim. I don't know. I'll be thinking about the podcast, but sometimes it's best to do that in the absence of the podcast. You can really sit back, do a reflection, take a look. You know what I mean? That's going to be next week, and I'm just going to chill. We all deserve a chance to chill. You know, the world has been rather difficult for the last couple of years, if you haven't noticed. 3 years, I guess. 2021, 22. A lot of pressure, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. And now comes an opportunity for some of us, I hope for you, to just pull back, have a glass of eggnog, put your feet up, hopefully, and just decompress a little bit, because there's been a lot of compression, okay? I'm planning to decompress a little bit, but in the decompressing, I'll be thinking about the show and where we go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I find it just fun to end the year on a Q&A. You know, it feels a little bit less pressurized, feels a little bit fun, feels like we're all together. You, me, the listeners of the John Huff podcast, and it's just fun for me. Fun for me to go to arcane places. Fun for me to shout out some of the listeners. You know, the reason that there's a show is that you folks are out there listening. And it's fun for me to acknowledge you, you know, and I do appreciate you so much. You know, you warm my cockles, kids. And it's just wonderful for me to be able to share all of you with each other. You know, we're all friends here. This is a safe space. And I thought I would begin this Q&A session with a bit of a soft one, you know, ease our way into it, not really get into the heavy stuff yet. And so I'm taking the first question from our old friend, Katie Pasco, who was a couple weeks ago a guest on this program. Katie of Fresh Breath, with whom I am honored to play. And Katie comes at me with a really gentle one to start off, where she says, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Nice, gentle one, you know, we'll just kind of coast in. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then she adds the caveat that she figured I would love/hate this question, and she's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. You are right, Katie. I do love and hate this question. I love it because it's my favorite thing. It's one of my favorite conversations to have, this conversation about where are you going? What do you want? What do you want to do? What are you into? What are you passionate about? You know, what warms your cockles? What are you doing, man? I love that conversation. I think it's maybe the most important conversation you can have. You know, so much of your fulfillment and your happiness depends on living what, you know, in Hinduism is called your Dharma. I'm concerned with my Dharma. That's ultimately the thing. And I love this conversation because I love this notion of purpose. And I love encouraging and inspiring people to go after what it is they want and to identify that and to feel confident in it. You know, the fulfillment comes in the pursuit of doing something meaningful. And I love the question for that reason because I love that conversation. And I hate the question because I don't have a good answer to it. This is the problem. I had another question from our old friend Corey Adcock of Vultures Playing Ruckus and of Collective Evolution, a great supporter of the program, Corey, great guitar player. And, you know, he is a great inspiration to me, should be to all of you, because, you know, he's a guitar player and a great one. And the COVID came along, and just like it took away music for everybody else, took it away for him. And so he turned his attention to his interest in photography and then spent kind of the COVID period really focusing on that as an artistic expression and becoming a really, really dang good photographer, in particular wildlife photographer. And now he has that. You know, he's getting back into playing with Collective Evolution, etc. But now he's got this other new skill that he's developed, this new interest he's developed, and the people who could use that time to develop another skill, good for you, man. Kudos to you, and thank you, Corey, for your continued support of this show. A little while back, Corey sent me questions, and he said one of them was, what's an ideal day look like for you? What's a perfect day look like for you now and in 10 years? And I think that dovetails very much with where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I'm not good at these projections. Part of the problem for me is that I just don't see myself in 5 years. I cannot call that to mind, you know, and they say you got to have a 5-year plan. What's your 2-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan? What's the plan? Where are you going? How are you going to get where you're going if you don't have a plan? How are you going to reach your destination without a map? Problem for me, I don't really have the destination. I think that's the big problem. So I look ahead to 5 years and nothing comes to mind, but there is a principle at work here, the fundamental, and the fundamental is this question of Dharma, this question of purpose, this notion that we all come to this planet with something that's in us to give. This is a paraphrase of Dharma. It runs much, much, much deeper conceptually than that. I'm a surface level Hindu, okay, kids, but I like this notion of purpose. I like this notion of Dharma. And, you know, I don't have a plan, but I have hopes. I have hopes that 5 years hence, I will have a better grip on what my particular Dharma is, what my particular service is, what my particular offering to you, to the world, to everyone is just more clear to me, that I have confidence in what my Dharma is, that I have certainty about what my Dharma is, and that I'm living it. You know, I'm reaching an age, kids, where people of my cohort are beginning to talk retirement, and quite legitimately. You know, the people I went to teachers college with who have been in the system now for 25 years, I mean, it's coming up. You know, they are reaching that magical calculation whereby they can retire with full pension. They did it. They did the mile, man. And I have other people who are like, 10 years, the countdown is on, you know what I mean? And I'm looking at those people and sometimes I freak out. Sometimes I freak the F out because I'm in no position to consider retiring because I don't have a career to retire from. Feels like you ought to be getting on with something, but then something comes into my mind that's very important. And the truth is, I don't want to retire. I do not want to be in a career from which I retire. You know, Corey, you're talking about what's an ideal day now and in 10 years. It's the same thing to me. An ideal day is a day where I wake up on my own terms and then I set myself to the work of my particular Dharma, the work of my particular purpose. When I set myself to my work, I want to work until the day I drop. I do not want to retire from a thing. I want what I do. I want who I am to be what I do. And I want that to happen all the way up until I freaking drop. So then that gives me a bit of comfort in the sense that I don't need to have something that I can retire from in 10 years because I plan to be working for another 40. Problem is, I don't know at what exactly. And I also don't know how on earth I shall make money. There's this part about making a living. You know, there are certain practical realities that just horn in a little bit on the conversation. And I get trapped sometimes. I get caught sometimes with anxiety and being worried about these things and feeling as though I'm behind, feeling as though I'm not measuring up, feeling as though I'm not accomplishing in the traditional way. And a lot of that can really mess you up, man. It can really cloud you. And that stifles your creative impulse and it makes you second guess and it can make you depressed. And that is just an energy that drops. I don't want dropped energy, so I try not to focus too hard on that. You know what I mean? So where do I see myself in 5 years, Katie? I don't know. I don't know. But what I hope is that in that 5 years, Corey, I'm waking up and living an ideal day, which has me working at something that is meaningful to me. You know, it's not, I want to wake up and put my feet up and have a mimosa and then watch Netflix and then Arsenal beats Man United 10-0. Then I go play a game of golf and then I have a pickleball around it. Like, there are lots of activities that I enjoy. But the ultimate fulfillment for me comes in giving my energy, giving my ability, expressing what is in me to express. And I hope that 5 years hence, I'm still playing music with people like Fresh Breath, people I enjoy personally, people whose music I enjoy playing and I think play well. And I would love it if Fresh Breath and me in 5 years were playing stadiums or whatever, you know? That would be great. I would love that side of my career to grow. I think there is Dharma in music for me, for some of us. I feel as though there's probably unfinished business in writing for me. You know, I'm still working at bringing myself back around to unlocking, to tapping that gift that I may have. But you know, you cannot get too rigid about your 5-year plans. This is the other thing. It's like you can set what you think you want in 5 years, and here are the steps to get there. And that's all good if that's what's intended for you. But you can also get so wrapped up and so locked into your 5-year plan that you utterly blow it. You become so focused on accomplishing this sequence, this set of things, that you don't realize it's the wrong sequence and the wrong set of things. You need to, as Dan Carlin said, leave space for destiny to intervene. Now I look at 5-year blocks. In 2010, if you had said to me, what's the 5-year plan? Where do you want to be by 2015? My answer would have been, I would like to have 2 novels published. And I would like to be living this really spectacular life as a literary figure, utterly driven by ego, by the way. And if I had held myself to that plan, in 5 years, I'm going to have 2 books out. It's going to be whatever. I'm going to be like a name in the literary world. And my focus is utterly on that. Had 2015 come around, I'd have been as depressed as I wound up being because that was not working, because it was driven from the wrong place. I was not accomplishing. I was not writing. My creativity was utterly choked because I was coming at it from the wrong place. But if I had focused on that, I would have found myself in 2015 with no books published, utterly depressed because things were going nowhere and at a complete loss, but I was just open enough. I mean, eventually, depression forced me to let go of the writing, and that allowed something else to blossom, which was music. 2012 comes along. I feel this. I literally hear a voice, and I feel this impulse that says you have to start playing music now. And so then you jump to 2015, and I'm playing in Hearts. I'm playing with Carly. We're doing road work. I have this sudden life in music that I didn't ever even imagine. I was not playing music in 2010. I was drumming. I was maybe jamming with people, but music was not a thing. Performing was not a thing. None of that was a thing for me. I was focused on being a writer, struggling as a freelancer, trying to find my way. And jump ahead 5 years, I'm living a life that I could not even have imagined at the time. I'm performing all the time. I'm touring. I'm recording with people. I have this band, Hiroshima Hearts. Utterly different life than I would have had I stuck to that 5-year plan. But it was the life that was meant for me at the time. And then think about 2015 to 2020. It's like, okay, it's 2015. I'm doing this thing. By 2020, I want to be touring 1,000-seat theaters with a label artist and yada, yada, yada. And I want to have 10,000 Instagram followers and blah, 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 blah. My life is going to be utterly wrapped up in music. I'll be recording. I'll be this. I'll be that. And then 2020 comes. 2020 comes. What happens? The music world utterly disappears. Nobody's 5-year plan accounts for a pandemic. You know what I mean? So you cannot be so focused on that 5-year plan that you do not allow destiny to intervene. Right? So I'm a little bit reluctant to focus too hard on where I'll be in 5 years. What I'm trying to do is develop a faith. Develop a faith that says in 5 years, if I remain diligent, if I keep doing the things that move me, if I keep being humble enough to take instruction from the universe, if I focus more on doing what feels intuitively right to do, that I want to do, that's in me to do, come 5 years, I'll be exactly where I need to be. And I have hopes. I have hopes that that means touring. I have hopes that that means writing. I have hopes that that means making a nice living. There's nothing wrong with making a nice living. And I have hopes that maybe in 5 years, this podcast has become bigger than it is, slicker than it is, better, just better. But in 5 years, I may be doing none of that. Next week, I might get a job offer that I didn't see coming, that feels right and fulfills me in a certain way and utterly changes the course and direction of my life. There is no 5 years, Katie. There is no 5 years. There is right now. And there is focusing right now on what feels good to you, on what feels right to you, on what is in you to give, giving that with the right intention and attitude, and then trusting that 5 years, or Corey, 10 years, will take care of themselves. Extremely, extremely difficult to do. I am in this game to recognize, understand, and express my Dharma, to express what is in me to express in whatever way that is best expressed. And I don't know the answer to that yet, but I'm hoping that 5 years hence, I will know. I'm hoping that 5 days hence, I will know, and that we can set ourselves on that course. But really, it's a moment-to-moment game, and I'm just trying to work on my moment-to-moment game. Corey had another somewhat less intense question. He said, hey, I'm 36, all right? He said, I'm certainly not 36 anymore. He says, what age is appropriate to be called sir? I'm 36 years old. I'm starting to get sirred here and there, and I don't like it one bit. What's appropriate? I'm going to present something very sobering to you, Corey. I don't know if you're too young for the TV show Cheers. Maybe you've seen it in reruns. I've been watching Cheers in reruns lately, and it actually kind of holds up in a way that a lot of 80s sitcoms do not hold up. But there's two guys who used to sit at the end of the bar on Cheers, all right? They were Cliff and Nami. I don't do a great Southie Boston accent. Cliff and Nami, the bar guys, supporting characters, comic relief. Those two cats who were just sitting at the end of a bar, apparently all day, every day. Cliff and Norm, all right? And you looked at those guys and you're like, guys are like in your mid-40s and you're just sitting at a bar all day long. How are you getting away with that? But then you go and you do the math and you look very closely and you realize that Cheers debuted in the year 1982, okay? I was 9 years old. And John Ratzenberger, who played Cliffy, the mailman, was 35 years old. And George Wendt, who played Norm, was 34. You look at those guys, and they're like full-on, grown-ass adult men. And you think of them as full-on, grown-ass adult men, and then you realize in retrospect, they were in their mid to early 30s. The world has changed. It's like when you see photographs or you see hockey cards from guys in the 70s. And every one of those players looks like they're 52 years old. What happened? Everybody used to age so quickly. Cliff and Normie, from the time that show started, looked like they were in their mid to late 40s. They were in their early 30s. It's staggering when you think about it. It just doesn't compute. And so I say that, Corey, because you're older than they were when we looked at them and thought they were grown-ass adult men. Things have changed dramatically. The age curve has really changed, all right? People in their mid-30s no longer are at stages of life that 30 or 40 years ago they would have expected to be. You would have got married at 21 and started cranking out kids. And so by the time you reached your mid-30s, you had like a job you'd been in for 10 years at the company, and you had a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and you had a wife, and you couldn't stand each other anymore. And it's like you were a full-on man. In your mid-30s, you were a full-on man. You were looking at a management job. You know what I mean? The whole curve has changed. We don't have that now. I fear for young people. People in their 20s still living at home. People reaching their 30s still living at home because they can't buy a home. And you can't afford to rent a place because they cost more than houses do. And this is a bee in my bonnet, and it really bothers me. I'm getting frustrated by how expensive housing is. And I'm lucky by sheer dint of timeline. I was born at a time when, I was here pre-housing bubble. I was able to afford a place, whatever. But kids now, younger people now, it's an utterly different trajectory. The milestones have moved. The goalposts have moved. And it's an interesting thing. So Corey, mid-30s, up until very, very recently, you're a full-on grown-ass man, and that makes you a sir. You were supposed to be like a man. And I'm not saying that you're not. I'm just saying that traditionally you have reached the age whereby, you're a sir. Cliff and Norm, who looked like middle-aged men, were younger than you when that show first aired. Staggering thought. And so I'm like an old man now. I'm like late middle age. You're full-on middle age. You're supposed to be in your mid-30s at that kind of level where you're a man. And this is going to be your life for the next 30 years, and then you're going to retire. The whole timeline has changed, but maybe some of the traditions continue. Or maybe people are just being polite. Or maybe with your braided beard and your long hair, that Viking look that you have, maybe people are just extra polite to you because they recognize in you some depth of maturity that belies your age. So be complimented by being called sir, because maybe it's a sign of respect. Maybe people recognize your energy or your wisdom as being somewhat ancient. Maybe there's a gravitas about you that commands respect from those who encounter you along the way. You wear a top hat better than almost anybody. You would have been great, in the 1800s. You would have been great. You're great now. So take it as a sign of respect. Take it as a sign that you carry with you some gravitas, because I'll tell you a secret. Nobody calls me sir, all right? So you command respect, and it's utterly appropriate at your age to be called sir. Don't sweat it, Jack. It's going to be all right. You're doing fine. Corey had one more question for me that I think is a little bit fun. He borrowed it from James Lipton. He borrowed it from Inside the Actor's Studio, which was a really great interview program. I think he used to run on PBS, and it was at whatever acting school, I think in New York, and they would bring in like Hollywood heavyweights. You've all seen it. And Hollywood heavyweights would be interviewed for the acting students at this school. And James Lipton had a series of questions he would always ask at the end, one of which was, I'm paraphrasing, if heaven and the pearly gates exist, what would you like to hear God say when you get there? And I've thought long and hard about this one, if you know my history. And Corey, I think what I would like to hear God or the angels say is, hey man, you didn't need to worry. You figured it out. It's okay. Welcome home. I would like to be reassured that I was okay. I figured it out, and I made it, and everything's fine. And I'm going to take that message with myself right now. I can project myself there. And if God is everywhere, if God is everything, then that includes you and me, my friend. So I can say it to myself. There's another school of thought that says we are all pieces of one source experiencing itself on earth. Know what I mean? We are source experiencing. Your partner Kelte will probably tell you this. We are all, according to one school of thought, one source. We are all one source experiencing life on earth. As different arms of one source. Or we are all God. And so you can say that to yourself. I would like to get to heaven, and they say, you didn't have to worry, Jack. You did fine. You did good. You accomplished what you came here to do. You learned the lessons that you came here to learn. And welcome home. That's what I would like to hear, Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Katie. Hopefully that's a pretty good start to our holiday Q&A session. Our old pal Jay popped up. Jay, longtime supporter of the show, and thank you very kindly. Jay and Tash and Elena. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. He came up with a bunch of questions. I can't do them all. He said, this is a fun one. He said, have you ever turned down a potential gig that could have changed your life? Have I ever turned down a potential gig that could have changed my life? And the quick answer to that, Jay, is, I don't know. It has not become apparent yet. And that's kind of the way it goes with these things. I have not turned down a lot of gigs. Straight up. I have politely declined invitations to come and play with or audition for bands because I was already committed to other bands or too busy. I had a pretty hot streak of being a road guy for a while, and that, you just don't have room to bring in or to sit in with other bands. And that happened quite a bit. And that was not a judgment on those acts. It's just like, I don't have time. I cannot commit to something else because I'm too busy doing this. There have been times when it just didn't feel right to me, or I felt as though I wasn't the right player. But the thing is, so far, that has not been life-changing. in an obvious way. I think what you're getting at is, did you say no to somebody who blew up later? No, that hasn't happened yet, but doesn't mean it won't. Sometimes a band can start and they say, hey man, come play with us. I'm like, sorry, dude, I can't. I'm on the road. I can't commit to that. And then it takes 5, 6, 10 years down the road and that band pops and finds a way. That hasn't happened yet, but it doesn't mean it won't with some of the people that I have not had the opportunity to play with or couldn't do. It's possible. Sometimes it's life-changing in a bad way, and you just don't know. There may have been times when I could have joined a band or played with an artist who turned out to be a freaking nightmare behind the scenes, and I just never knew that and never found out. You don't know what you don't know sometimes, but it is not obvious yet that I have turned down a gig that might have changed my life. The most life-changing thing about playing with people tends to be the people themselves. You know what I mean? So I look around at the people who are in my life, and so many of them now are my friends, whatever, the people I spend a lot of my time with, they're in the music world. And had I not joined the music world, vast swaths of the people in my life would not be there. It would be an utterly different life. And so that maybe is the bigger question. Is there a gig you turned down which would have brought people into your life who could have been life-changing? Again, that's possible, but you have to kind of adopt the idea that if you work from your intuition, if you work from good intention, and if you come from the right place, then the people who are meant to be in your life will find their way in, or vice versa. And the opportunities that are meant to you will come to you. And you have to be okay with that. As the Tao Te Ching says, have faith in what is, So I try to have faith in what is. If there had been a band I did not play with that eventually blew up, which still could happen, that could be a little bit tough. On the surface, ego-wise, be like, I would like to be playing that arena right now. But again, you don't know. That band, if you did not find your way into it, it's not the right band for you, not the right gig for you. And so it might have been a nightmare for me, or it might have utterly pulled my relationship apart, or it might change your life in a bad way. So I tend to not look at things I turned down, even if they exploded, not meant for me, and so therefore wouldn't be life-changing for me in necessarily a positive way, if that makes sense. You kind of have to have faith in the way things are, I try to follow the Tao. So, to my knowledge, I have not turned down a gig that might have changed my life. But stay tuned. We'll see how some of this stuff plays out. Jay had another question about supergroups. I'm not great at supergroups. Supergroups, there's just too many people. And who's in the group and what sort of music is it? And yada. And plus, King's X already exists. How am I going to beat that for a supergroup? You know what I mean? But a question that I find fun and provides a compelling segue for me is, what do I really want for Christmas? Jay says, what does John, that's me, really want for Christmas? And that provides an excellent segue into the Patreon plug. What do I really want for Christmas? Folks, there is a Patreon page for this podcast. It is patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. I launched the Patreon page this year because I don't want to do ads. I do not like ads. I get annoyed with ads that pop up, and sometimes you listen to a podcast and the whole first 4 minutes is ads. And then they talk for a little bit, and then another 4 minutes of ads, and it's all the same freaking ads. And God love them. Podcast advertising is a good idea. Obviously, it works because people keep doing it, but I find it intrusive. I find that it annoys me, and I just fast forward the freaking ads anyway. I do not want to fill this program with ads, and so I have taken the alternate route, which is Patreon. What Patreon does is, for a monthly fee, allow you, the listener, to support the show. Now, my Patreon, patreon.com/John Huff Podcast, has one tier of membership. It is $5 a month. Think of it, as I always say, of tipping me $1.25 for every episode that I do. If you are getting edification, education, inspiration from this program, if it warms your cockles, if you look forward to it every week as a friendly voice in your ear holes, as something that adds some value to your life, please do consider, as a Christmas gift to me, signing up and supporting on Patreon. Is $5 a month. I've begun to post videos there. I am trying to generate Patreon-specific content, something exclusive, something that just gives a little boost of value to your membership. But really, Patreon is simply about saying to a creator, I see what you're doing. I value what you're doing. I would like to support what you're doing in a financial way. And for me, that means $5 a month. I want to thank the people who have signed up to do that so far. Thank you so much. It really does give me a boost. And if you're looking for a Christmas gift for me, that's not a bad one. All right. But not everybody can do that. Not everybody's got the $5 to spare. Not everybody wants to support in that way. And that's totally fine too. As a Christmas gift for me, you want to make me feel good. You want to promote in a way. Doesn't cost you anything except maybe 15 seconds. Please leave a rating and review, preferably a positive one. Go on to Apple, wherever you listen to the show, and can leave such a review. Just a quick couple of sentences that says, hey, I like what this guy's doing and here's why. 5 stars would help. And you know what that does? That helps the show reach a wider audience, provides a bit of a track record for people who are checking it out for the first time, might be interested. And it makes me feel really good. Pumps my ego, pumps my tires just a little bit. But it feels really good when you get a notification that says, hey, you got a review. And you go look at it and you're like, oh, wow, somebody out there is listening. Somebody out there likes it. And it makes it feel just a little bit more not that it doesn't feel worthwhile, but it's just a confirmation, I guess. It's just a confirmation that says, you're doing good, kid. Keep going. So, you don't want to support on Patreon? That's cool. Please leave a rating and review. You don't want to do that? That's okay too. You can just share these episodes. I post them on Facebook. I post links. Post them on Instagram. I post links. You can share them. You can tell your friends. If you're looking for a gift for me, just tell your friends about this podcast if you like it. And share it. Help spread the word. Word of mouth is still the best marketing. So, Jay, there's nothing that I want for Christmas. There's nothing that I need for Christmas. I'm really, really fortunate to have reached a place in my life where I got everything I need. I got everything I want, really. And I got the drum gear that I like, and I've got podcast gear that I like. I don't need or want anything. I really genuinely don't, in a material sense. But again, if you want to support the show, that's the way to do it. Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. Ratings, reviews, shares, word of mouth. And thank you so kindly for all of that, kids. Jay asked me what's my least favorite Christmas song. I don't have a podcast long enough for that. And I don't have a specific answer. The temptation is to say Mariah because she's become a meme. And I got to be honest, every time I hear that song starting, something tenses me up a little bit. And it's got something to do with, I think, just having all of this thrust upon us involuntarily. But at the same time, I like Christmas and I like the Christmas season. And I even like Christmas music, all right? Give me Frank. Give me Nat, give me Bing, give me the Ronettes. If there's a song or a group of songs that are my least favorite of Christmas, chances are they were recorded in the last 10 or 20 years. You know what I mean? Do not tend to enjoy your modern Christmas songs, but take me back. Give me the Vince Guaraldi Trio. Give me Harry Connick Jr.'s record, the first one, the first Christmas album. I do like the classics, and I really love it. Like hearing Frank, hearing some of those tunes from the 40s, 50s, 60s, takes me back. Again, we know that I'm nostalgic for periods that I did not experience. And it can take me back to a weirdly idealized and quaint 1950s kind of Christmas, you know? And I like to imagine that. I like to feel that. And it may have been crappy, I don't know. But in my mind, it was great. And when I hear Frank singing, I hear Elvis singing, I like the kind of old school Christmas tunes. And I put them on, you know? Put them on in the car. Like to feel them, warms my cockles. Do not enjoy the modern Christmas music all that much. So if I have a least favorite, I cannot identify it specifically, but chances are really good it comes from the last 10 years, you know? Time is flying by, and I'm going to get into a big one here. This is going to take a bit. This is going to be a big piece here. It's going to be a set piece. I got a really fun but really challenging question from our old friend Kay Howell. Kay Howell, who was a guest on this program, very popular episode, a magnificent and supremely talented performer with whom I am very, very fortunate to play, the great Kay Howell. And she wrote and she said, what are your top 5 tour memories of all time in no particular order? And how does a fella answer a question like that? I rack my brains, and there's an endless litany of memorable stuff. But the top 5, like the ones that really stand out. And what's compelling to me is that the memories that I've got that I'm going to talk about, none of them are performances. None of them are stage memories. And when you're on the road, the shows just kind of blur together. And after a while, they all become a different version of the same thing. And it's very rare for something to stand out in one of those shows as being an anomaly or being different. And rare still for that anomaly to have been one of your greatest memories of all time. You know, they're just gigs. And anybody who performs a lot will tell you that. After a certain point, unless, like you're walking out on the stage at Skydome for the first time, which I've not done yet, but hopefully I will, Katie, within the next 5 years. Otherwise, the shows are just shows. It's what's going on around the shows that creates the memories. And I got 5 of those. And they give me an opportunity to do some reading from my tour blogs, which is really fun. One of my favorite road experiences I talked about recently on the show, it was being on the train, coming home from a 6-week run out west with Carly Thomas, looking out the window, going across the prairies at night, and seeing just a canopy of stars, no light pollution. Listening to the live version of Beth Rest by Bon Iver, that was a transcendent moment. Already talked about it, don't need to do it again. I'll give you some other ones, okay? And again, so many of these memories are really about what's going on around the shows, and they're about the connections you make with people, specifically your bandmates. So as I'm going through some of my memories, some of them just resonate with me for that reason. And I'm going to begin with a moment that I wrote about in the November book from the 2017 Sarah Smith Euro tour, okay? This is the first European tour we did. Sarah, myself, Denny Gauthier on guitar, Ken the Zen on bass. It was our first foray. We were, as I called us on my blog and eventually in the book, pioneers in reverse, conquering the old world. We were playing a show toward the end of the tour in a tiny little town in Austria called Neumarkt an der Ybbs. Hope I'm saying that properly, something close to that. This tiny little town, this ancient, tiny, gorgeous, wonderful, beautiful little town in Austria. So charming. And it was a town small enough that having a touring Canadian band come in was a big deal. And there was a school there which had a big kind of auditorium with a nice stage that also doubled as a community center. And that's where the gig was. And we showed up to this gig, and it was the 100% rock star treatment in a way that we did not experience often, you know? We tour and we play. I am not a rock star, but I felt like one when we kind of swept into the lobby of this place, and like the local paper was there and people were excited. There were people everywhere. They wanted autographs and they wanted photographs. You're like, wowzers, who do they think just walked in here? It was very, very cool and a super cool feeling. And so we played the show, and the show was a show. I think we played well. I think it was by that point in the tour, we were pretty tight, kind of a well-oiled machine. You know, we had fallen into the rhythm, and that rhythm expressed itself on the stage. It was a good night. That much I remember, all right? And what would happen is at the end of every show, I'm the drummer. I got so much gear to pack up. So Sarah would jump off stage, go to the merch table. Ken and Denny could very quickly wrap up their gear, get it set aside, and then go off and, do the post-show thing. And I would often find myself on stage alone, just packing up my gear. And that seems kind of sad when you look at it. We didn't have roadies. It was not the sort of tour whereby you leave the stage and then everybody filters home and then the roadies come out and pack up all your stuff and you're on the bus drinking Yoo-Hoo. Not like that. We pack up our own gear. We carry our own gear, all right? This was indie. This is DIY. So I wrote in my tour blog, which became the book November, A Month in Europe with Sarah Smith, of which there are still a few copies floating around. I wrote a little vignette of this memory that's one of my top 5K of all time. I'm going to read it to you right now. The show is over. The encores are played, the bows are bowed. These lovely people have cheered for us and asked for even more. I'm on the stage alone, packing up my drums, calculating and recalculating to be sure I have everything. This isn't Fitzray's in L-Town. There's no coming back tomorrow for anything left behind. I hear a burst of familiar laughter and I smile. Ken and Denny charming the fans. I look up and there they are. Their beards, their toques. They clink their bottles together, making sure to look each other in the eye as they do. This has become our custom. I have a lot to do, but I take a moment to enjoy this picture. Ken and Denny, the people. And then in the distance I see Sarah at the merch table, signing yet another autograph, smiling for yet another picture. Her smile is genuine. And that's what it's really all about. Why do we do this? In the end, it's about love. Not just the love we have for playing, but the love that surrounds this experience. Sarah brings love to people through her music, through her energy. They bring love back to us too. It's about service. We serve people when we play. They serve us when they listen. As Sarah's song says, it all comes back. And then it's back to packing up my drums. Another show, another ritual, another memory to put in its place. Cue the crowd applause, sound effect, producer. Just transcendent moment. Just being on stage, packing up my gear, and then just hearing Ken and Denny laughing, talking to some people, hearing and looking and seeing Sarah in the distance. And it was just this feeling of, wow, I can't believe this is my life right now. This is really happening. Good things happen when you put yourself out there. You know what I mean? And it sort of hit home in that moment, gave me a chance to wax Semi-Eloquent on paper. So that was a huge tour moment for me. Really loved just that moment of affection that I had for my bandmates, and for the novelty of just being in that situation was really great. There was another one with the same crowd, the same group, and we were on the Reeperbahn. We were on the Reeperbahn in Hamburg, Germany. If you know anything about the Reeperbahn, it's the devil's playground, okay? The Reeperbahn is one of the most notorious streets in all of Europe. Can be a rough place, man. It can be a wild place, all right? We're talking kink shops, sex shops, endless bars. There's hookers. There's a lot of drugs. The Reeperbahn is a scene, man. I mean, any tawdry desire is possible there for you on the Reeperbahn. It's like the dark side of Vegas. You know what I mean? The Reeperbahn, you keep your head up, all right? There's a lot of people around who are on drugs, who are drunk, who are sketched out, who are partying. There's a lot of illicit stuff happening. There's a lot of creepy stuff happening. You keep your head up, but there's a club that we played a couple times. Great club called Cowboy und Indianer, right in the heart of the Reeperbahn. And, as I said, you keep your head up down there. We had some fun shows, though. It was a real party atmosphere, but it's just a little bit dangerous, can be. We never had any issues, I will say that, but I'm hyper vigilant to begin with, so maybe I'm remembering it with more vigilance than is required, but I don't think so. All right, the Reeperbahn is notorious for a reason. So we had played a show, Cowboy and Indianer, and I had this great moment. I had this great moment where our friend Boogie came up and he played guitar with us. And then at the end of the show, Boogie brings me his guitar, and it's covered in signatures. Pretty cool. He wants me to sign the guitar. Wow, what a privilege. Then he says to me, this is not the memory, by the way, I'm just setting it up. Then he says to me, there's only one other drummer signature on this guitar, and that belongs to Mickey D of Motorhead. So there's a guitar in the world which has zillions of signatures on it from musicians. Only two drummers, Mickey D and this guy. And if ever two names did not belong together on a guitar, it's Mickey D and me. Mickey D's a freaking legend, and I'm Schmucky the drummer. But wow, what a privilege. So the same night, show's over, we are outside, and I wrote about this memory too in my tour blog from 2018. The post is called Hamburg 3. Here's what it says. I mentioned above that I'm in a room right now with two of the best guys on the planet. I want to give you an illustration of what I'm talking about. We make jokes about the Reeperbahn. There's always a bit of nudge, nudge, wink, wink with stories about that street because it is notorious for its excesses. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's an absolute freak show if you want it to be, but the truth is there can be some sobering sights on a street best known for its inebriation. Last night after the gig, we went next door to Hesbaga for a snack. It's a burger stand where you can get the usual fast food and then hang around outside on the street and eat. Very Anthony Bourdain. The deep-fried cheese and broccoli balls are highly recommended. Anyway, last night we were standing around a table and I saw a guy staggering down the street toward us. He was obviously on something heavy. He approached us, yammering in German, and stepped between Ken and Denny. He was missing teeth, he was jittery, and Ken didn't even blink. He simply offered the guy some food, which he accepted after a few seconds of figuring out what was going on. He ate a cheese and broccoli ball, laughing, and then stuck his hand out for Denny to shake. Denny shook the hand, and then wrapped his arms around the guy in a bear hug before sending him on his way. And I bet he hadn't been hugged like that in a long, long time. A few seconds later, another guy shuffled up to us and our friend Angelica handed him 10 euros. I learned so much from these people. They have such big hearts and open spirits. Even as I type this, it kind of brings a tear to my eye, even as I read it, kids. The world could be a much better place if everyone approached it and each other with the kind of compassion and humanity that I see in my bandmates. I am so proud of them. They are simply good people, and I am profoundly gratified to know that my vibration has put me in their circle to share, to grow, to learn. 5 years earlier, I couldn't have seen that coming, just saying. We're on the Reeperbahn, and this dude comes up who's obviously having a rough freaking life, man. Has made some poor decisions or been forced into some poor decisions, suffered some trauma. Who knows why people get into a state like that guy was in. It was not cool. And a lot of people could have run for the hills. I'm hypervigilant. I was wary as this guy was approaching, but there's Ken and Denny. And they're just like, here, have some food. And here's a hug. And it's like, that's the sort of tour memory that sticks with you. I don't remember anything about the show we played that night. I do remember the compassion and the heart and the openness that I saw in those two guys and in Angelica. And that warms my freaking cockles, man. That is a top 5 tour memory of all time. But you know, Kay, there's one with you in it. Kay and I were the backing band for Sarah on the tour in 2021. We went as a three-piece, went as a trio. Killer three-part harmonies, and Kay holding down on guitar the bass lines and playing keyboard stuff. And it was really unique and novel and a cool arrangement, and we did great. Kay, I don't know if you talked about this when you were a guest on the show or not. Maybe you did. But the very last show we played in Race, Germany, at this great little club, was a top 5 tour moment for me, I think, for a couple of reasons. One of which was you, because Kay opened all the shows on that tour, most of them, playing her own stuff, and she amassed very quickly a following, a fan base out of Sarah's fans and others who came to see the shows, because Kay's freaking great. Kay is dynamite. I have never played with anybody more naturally gifted than Kay Howell, okay? And I'm not just blowing smoke. For Kay, like it is for so many other people who are kind of indie level performers making a career out of playing wine bars, playing craft breweries, playing wherever, so often you are not playing your own music, you're playing covers to groups of people who aren't really listening. And then you hear a smattering of applause, and then somebody will yell out, "Hey, play this song." And so you play it and they don't even listen. That happens all the time. If you call out a song, kids, do the artist the service of actually listening. Know what I mean? These can be soul-destroying gigs. And if you're a person who has aspiration to play your own music and to make a career out of that and to express yourself artistically and to make that your Dharma, or to express that as your Dharma, can really eat your soul, eat your confidence to be in these rooms where you play what they call wallflower gigs or wallpaper gigs, where nobody's listening, nobody cares, and you just sort of play away at whatever you're doing, and you're like, why am I doing this? Getting paid a few $100, okay, need the money. Is this fulfilling to me? Is this moving my soul? I have these gifts. I have these abilities. I have this to express, and nobody cares. It can be soul destroying, but then you go to Europe and you're playing in Sarah's band, you open for Sarah, there are listening audiences, and you play for them, kind of for the first time in your life, your own songs from your own record, and they listen, and over time they learn the words and they sing them back to you. And Kay had this utterly, I think, profound and transformative experience where she recognized, oh, wait a minute, it's possible. It is possible for me to do this, for me to play my own songs, and for people to listen and to sing them back to me. And as we played the last show of that tour, I think it was coming into focus for her. She had this experience. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kay, but I think we talked about this. She had this experience for a month or 6 weeks or whatever it was of being an artist in much more the vein that she wanted and was purposeful and meaningful to her. And she'd had this experience, and I think she was reflecting on that and taking it all in and knowing that she was coming back home. She's coming back home to, maybe what it used to be. So she'd had this experience. It was very, very emotional, and it was really powerful. She's embarrassed about it, but she broke down a couple times during her opening set, to the point where at a certain point, somebody yelled out, "Somebody give Kay a hug." The fans loved her so much, and were so affectionate towards her, warmed her cockles. And for me, it was a fun tour memory, just seeing her having that experience, realizing what's possible, really, really powerful. And it just makes me feel good to know that you had that experience, Kay. And then I think it's changing for you. And I think that you're now seeing possibility that you didn't before. And that was an important show for me too. It felt to me like that show was the culmination of a 4-year stretch of growth. It was 2021. It was my 4th tour with Sarah. I began playing with Sarah in 2017. And we had done, that was my 4th Europe thing. I go back and forth across Canada, down into the States. I played a lot with Sarah. I put in a lot of miles with Sarah. I had learned a lot about myself as a person, about possibility as a touring player, about how to be a touring player. I had evolved exponentially as a drummer throughout this process. Some of that learning was very, very difficult. I had a lot of self-doubt. I had a lot of frustrating nights. I had nights where I was really down on myself. And you learn to deal with that and get better and come back. And in that moment, at the end of that tour, it was the last night of the tour, demanding tour, a busy tour, as they all are, and that's the way we like it. It was the last show, and I had a sense of culmination there. So I don't know if this is a favorite tour memory or not, but it's tied in to Kay's night. And so it resonates, and I remember it. And I just had that feeling of the ending of a cycle. And I didn't know then, and perhaps don't even know now, if it was the end of a much longer cycle than that. It was 2021. I started playing music again seriously in around 2012. So it was very nearly the end of a 10-year cycle, maybe. And I don't know what music is now. You know, things have changed. COVID has changed everything. And so I don't know if that was a culmination and the end of me as a touring player. I hope not, but maybe. Or maybe it was the end of kind of an apprenticeship. I don't know that either, but it felt profound in the moment. It felt like the end of something. It felt like a culmination of something. And so that night sticks out to me as an important tour memory. I don't know if it's a favorite or not, but it's important to me. And I already mentioned Bon Iver, so I'm going to use that as one. So we got Bon Iver, we got Reeperbahn, we got Newmarket and der Ebbs, we got Kay's last night on tour. There have been so many great shows. I mean, there are definitely shows that stick out in my mind. But I'm going to give you right now what I think is my all-time favorite road memory. This is not a tour memory. It was not technically a tour, but it was a road memory. It was an out-of-towner. And it was 2015? Maybe it was 2015. And it was a road date with the Carly Thomas Band. And here's what happened. On a Friday night, we had played at Call the Office in L-Town. God rest its soul. A major casualty of COVID, like so many other venues. The legendary Call the Office. We had played on Friday night the Carly Thomas Explode EP release party. So that was a big deal, all right? Release shows are kind of, you tend to have more people come to your release show. It's an event. It's a big deal. Carly had recorded this great EP called Explode. And sometime after that, I had joined her band as the drummer. I did not play on the record. Matt Very did. Matt's a great dude and an awesome drummer, and he crushed it on that EP. And at a certain point, anyways, I wound up playing with Carly. And I was in the band for the Explode EP release party. It was a lot of pressure. We had really, really prepared for it. A lot of rehearsal, a lot of getting in the groove, a lot of getting in the zone. And then we tried to make the night special. We tried to make an event out of it at a venerable old venue. And it was a good crowd. And we played hard and we played well. And when it was done, there was just a sense of release and relief. It was just, we did it. You know, a job well done. Ken the Zen was on bass. Pat Dryberg was playing guitar. Carly, of course, and myself. And we had become a unit. At that point in time, we had kind of become a unit together. And it was expressed at that release party. But it was high pressure. All right? So I don't know how much we enjoyed it. We did. But again, it was pressure. It was work we had to be on. So when it was done, it was just kind of a relief. The next night, on a Saturday, we were scheduled to play the Press Club in Toronto. Press Club, also gone now, was one of those quintessential Toronto rooms where you walk in and it's this long, narrow room and the band sets up on the floor by the door. Venues like that are a dime a dozen in T-Dot, or at least they were pre-COVID. I don't know if they exist now. They do, maybe just not as many of them. So we got to the Press Club with this huge sense of relief. Like, we did the big show. We succeeded. We did it. We nailed it. And then the next night was just like this very relaxed, very free. We were on a bill with some other bands. They were cool. We played our set. It was good. and just free, really, really nice, relaxing feeling. And then here's where maybe my favorite road memory kicks in. Again, it's not the show, it's around the show. It's about the people. We're driving home from Toronto to L-Town. It's a couple-hour drive. It's late at night. That's how it goes. And I'm driving, and Carly, I think, was in the passenger seat beside me. She was probably dozing. I think Ken and Pat were in the back seats. Pat was probably dozing. Ken was just doing his Ken thing, which is very quiet. So it was dark in the van. There might have been moonlight outside. Everybody's quiet. There is an energy that was so serene in the van, so tranquil, tranquil. And I was driving, and I just had this profound sense. We were a unit at that point in time. Like we had done it. We had done the release show. We had come down and played the press club. We'd done well. The weekend was done. We could decompress and relax. And I'm driving the van, and I know Carly's there, and I know Ken and Pat are in the back. Everybody's safe. Everybody's happy. There is this just satisfied kind of energy. Very peaceful, very quiet. And I was driving, and I felt responsibility for these people. I felt like I really love these people. I'm getting them home safe. We've done this great thing together, and it just warmed my cockles. It just felt this kind of surge, kind of uprising of affection and emotion. The same kind of affection I felt in Austria when I was on the stage looking at my bandmates out there. The same kind of affection I felt for them on the Reeperbahn. The same kind of surge of kind of oneness when I was listening to Bon Iver and looking out the window. You know what I mean? The same kind of affection I felt for Kay when I watched her stumbling through, leaving on a jet plane, saying goodbye to this transcendent experience. And those are the great moments on the road. These moments where you feel that oneness, these moments where you feel just an uprising, I guess of purpose. Like in that moment, you are where you want to be, you're where you're supposed to be, things are working, and you're with people whose vibe resonates with you, that you feel connected to. This is the great part of the road. It's being connected to the people who are with you. And when that is right, and you can recognize it, and you can feel that, there are not many feelings that exceed that level of, I think it's Dharma, kids. I think it's actually Dharma. And those are my memories that stand out, Kay, and you're part of it. And I hope in the future, there will be more of those for you and me, and for Katie and Josh, Carly, and whoever else comes along, that destiny caused to intervene. Whoa. After that, it kind of makes it hard to drop to our old friend Pete's question. Because Pete brought us, hey, Dave or Sammy? And I'm not going to do that to you, kids. I'm not going to do that to you because I know we've done that to death. It's Dave. He also said Bon Scott or Brian Johnson, and I'm 100% a Bon Scott guy, and that is not a knock on Brian Johnson, by the way. Brian Johnson, extremely recognizable, extremely unique, was a perfect, ideal fit for AC/DC after Bon Scott's death. And from what I can tell and what I've seen, Brian Johnson seems like a lovely man. I think he's just a really good, nice man. Bon Scott is Brian Johnson's one of the greatest of all time too. Bon Scott was one of the great rock and roll singers ever. Bon Scott's voice, he was crazy. Bon Scott would tear you a new one. He was nuts. But my goodness, Bon Scott's AC/DC, there was something so special about that guy and his voice. And, if I could sing like somebody, Bon Scott would be on my list of folks. And Brian Johnson inspired so many who came after him. You think of Tom Kiefer, you think of Dizzy Dean from Brittany Fox, but think about the people inspired by Bon Scott, Jesse James, who was also of Jackal, who was also inspired, of course, by Brian Johnson. But people who come in with that gritty Australian style rock and roll, I love that. Airborne, I love that. Bon Scott is the archetype for me of that stuff. And so for me, much as Brian Johnson's great, wonderful man, it's Bon Scott for me. Bon Scott's AC/DC is AC/DC for me. It's the AC/DC for me. And Pete said, Angus or Malcolm Young, how do you separate them? How do you separate them? Angus gets all the attention because he's Angus Young, plays the leads, a lot of spotlight on him. Malcolm Young, one of the great rhythm guitarists of all time, and contributed so much to the writing for AC/DC. You know, it is said AC/DC was really Malcolm Young's band. All right, Bon and Brian and Angus are the poster children. You think AC/DC, you think Angus Young in his schoolboy uniform, or you think of Brian Johnson's cap. You don't think of Malcolm Young, but you should, because he was so much the driving force, and he wrote so much of that stuff. But I don't think you separate them. I think Angus and Malcolm go together, and one without the other, as we see now, is not the same AC/DC. I have one last question, submitted to us by no less than Denny Boy himself, about whom I have waxed so eloquently on this episode. An important figure in my life, Denny Goche, one of my favorite people anywhere. And, you know, the great legacy of playing with Sarah, one of them is connecting to Denny in the way that I have. Denny was my roommate through 3 freaking tours, man. Denny Goche, the man, the legend, says, how far is too far? Whoa, how far is too far? And you know what the answer to that is, Denny boy? As I'm looking now at like an hour 13, I think too far is probably an hour 14. So I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to go. This is going to be it, I think, for the year, kids. I want to thank you so much for supporting. Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast, Instagram at John Huff Podcast, Facebook at The John Huff Podcast, TikTok at The John Huff Podcast. You know, I shut the show down. I shut it down for months. I thought I was done. And I came back, and all of you folks out there were glad that I did, and you told me. And I want you to know how much that keeps me going. There are times when it is difficult. Because. And the feedback I get from you, and the encouragement I get from you, the inspiration I get from you, really keeps me going. And I hope I give some of that back to you when I do this show. I hope that you leave at least feeling good. If you came into an episode feeling down, I hope you leave it feeling good. I hope you learn things. I just hope you enjoy it. I know you do, because you hang with me and I appreciate it. This holiday season, best enjoyed in the warm embrace of kith and kin. Hope you take some time. I'm going to take some time. I got some thinking to do about where we go from here. And again, it's best done separate from the show. Try to relax. Try to smile. You know, try to embrace what is good. Try to embrace what warms your cockles. And I just hope it's really good for you. I hope life is really good for you. And I hope you're seeing the positive. And I hope you're allowing space for destiny. And I hope you're focusing on your Dharma. Because we have a much better world when people are living that. When people are expressing, when people are giving, when people are serving in the ways in which it's in them to do so, everything gets a lot better. That's going to be my focus. I hope it's your focus too. I'm going to shutting up for the last time, I suspect, in the year 2022. I will be back with warm cockles sometime very, very soon. Until then, take care. Have a wonderful Christmas. Have a wonderful holiday. And hey, I'll check you later. Yeah. You know, there are people out there whose job it is to find pretty girls in the crowd at World Cup games and tell the camera operators to focus on them. You want to talk about Dharma, kids?